I submit that that really established the fact that if you are desiring sexual gratification, then it must be by the hands of someone else, or it must be because of the input of someone else. In other words, as we made mention last week, if it was permissible for God to, permissible by God for someone to get involved with self-sexual gratification, then the statements made by Paul would not be of any value, because, again, what the Bible is actually saying is, if you want to experience sexual gratification, then you must get married in order to have the privilege of that experience. Paul goes on and says later in that same chapter, he says, "This I speak to those who are single and those who are widowed. If you can't contain," and it means that if you must have sexual gratification, and let me say this as a sidebar, it is not sinful for you to have those desires. It's not sinful for you to want to become intimate. It's not sinful that you want to experience this awesome gift from God, because that was God's intent. As a matter of fact, at the very beginning of creation, God made the statement that it's not good that man be alone. In addition to that, his first commandment, his first commandment to the couple, husband and wife, Adam and Eve, was be fruitful and multiply. And so I know people, when the Bible says if you can't contain, people may be made ashamed, or people may be feeling guilty because they had the desire. That desire, again, is not sinful. Excuse me. That desire is actually a natural desire, but it is a desire that cannot be satisfied outside of the procedure or the prerequisite that God has established, and that's through marriage. God is saying that through Paul, again, for those single and those who are widowed, if you can't contain, he's saying that then it's better to marry than to burn. And that burning means to burn with lust, to have a constant battle with wanting to experience sexual gratification and not being able to, because you have not satisfied the prerequisite. But again, if masturbation was okay, if it was permissible, the recommendation from Paul would not be applicable, because, again, if you were burning with desire, then you could satisfy yourself. And so it's very easy to see that from the two examples that I've given, or from the two texts that I've given, that are actually requiring one to be married, and then it also, so that we cannot err, it also establishes that once we're married, the husband has a responsibility and the wife has a responsibility. But the question was, well, what if my husband does not fulfill his husbandly responsibility? First of all, let me say this. Whatever is not permissible by God, and if it is done, then it is sin. There is no excuse for sin. No matter what the husband may or may not do, whatever the wife may or may not do, there's no excuse for you to sin. And so if we are in agreement that masturbation and self-gratification is outside of the will of God, then let me establish, first of all, that no matter what the other partner may or may not be doing, it does not give you the license to do it. And I know that is a hard saying, and I know that for many married couples, it's not a statement that they will want to embrace, because it is really a challenge, a terrific challenge, when two people have followed the Lord's dictate, they have gotten married, and then one does not fulfill their spousal duties when it comes to sexuality, because again, that is what God says we must do in order to experience it. And so, if they've gotten married, and I'm not saying that by any means that should be the whole reason for marriage. As a matter of fact, and we will have a discussion about this a little bit later on. Many people are getting married because of their focus on sexuality. And that is one of the craziest reasons. Only if that's the only reason you're getting married, then you're doomed, because marriage is not about sexuality. And let me say this, marriage is really not even about love. Marriage is about commitment. Once you are committed to someone, and that's what a marriage is. A marriage is a vow of commitment. A marriage is a promise in the eyes of God that I am going to be committed to this person for better or for worse. And whether or not that's part of your vow or not, it really is immaterial, because again, God's intent is that marriage is permanent. That is one of the reasons that He gave humanity sexuality, because that enables the bonding, further bonding that will be beneficial to the permanence of that union. But getting back to the question, first, my immediate answer is, if your husband or your wife is not doing what they're supposed to do, then it still does not give you license to get involved in masturbation. It still does not give you license to get involved with pornography. It still does not give you license to go out and get you a blow-up doll, or go out and purchase a vibrator. It does not give you license to do that. What you are doing is you're allowing and again, anything that we don't do that God tells us to do, or anything we do that God tells us not to do, is sin. And so whether it's done ignorantly or deliberately and with full knowledge, transgression of God's law, transgression of God's will still is sin. And so if the husband is not fulfilling his duty, then of course he is the person that is sinning. He's the person that's being disobedient. Don't allow his disobedience, or don't allow her disobedience, if it's the wife that's not fulfilling her duty, to drag you down. Now, the main thing is this. A marriage is a union of two individuals with problems. A marriage is a union with two individuals with issues. A marriage is a union with two individuals who need help from each other. Without going into a lot of detail, there may be a reason why the husband is not fulfilling his duty. And even though I'm not justifying it, in a lot of cases, and I'm not saying all, but in a lot of cases, the husband may not be fulfilling his duty because of what the wife is doing, and it's also vice versa. The wife may not be doing fulfilling her wifely duties because of what the husband is doing. I think that there are some issues that have to be addressed, and we don't have time to go over them right now. But I really wanted to answer the question in regards to what our subject has been about, because what the devil does, he will come to us and he would justify in our minds the reason to sin. And let me say this. The sad reality in our culture is that we are too much in a hurry to say I do. We are too much in a hurry to get emotionally involved with someone that we know very little about before we get emotionally involved. The problem is not what God has directed. The problem is not the structure that God has purposed. The problem is we are not going about it the right way. There are many people who are jumping into marriages that should not even be together. And thus, when they get involved in that union, because they one or both may not be mature, one or both may not have the degree of selflessness that a marriage needs. One or both may not know the Lord. One or both may not even have their marriage in prayer. All I'm saying to you is, if we enter into a union ill-advised, if we enter into a union that God has not directed, then we are kind of asking for problems. We're kind of asking for issues. We're kind of asking for trouble. And so when we start to experience that trouble, then we want to jump out of it. And really, the sad reality is you got to stay there because no one twisted your arm to say I do. Now, again, I know this is a hard saying, but part of the reason we have these discussions, my brothers and sisters, is to help people who've not made the mistake not to make the mistake. In essence, we want people to learn from our mistakes. We want people to learn from others' mistakes. And even though we are addressing these issues, sometimes we get ourselves in a predicament where it seems, and I'm using that word very strongly, where it seems that the only remedy is to do that which is sinful. And again, that's a lie from the devil. The Bible tells us, first of all, that we must die to self daily. And quite naturally, as in most cases, in most marriages, the sexuality part is not even considered the way that it should. People are getting involved into a marriage or in this day and time, just into a relationship, expecting something from the other person. In other words, you're getting involved into a relationship that you have expectations of what you're going to receive as opposed to expectations of what you're going to give. A marriage is not a relationship that you get in to give. I'm sorry, to get. The marriage is a relationship you get in to give. And I know that is not compatible with our natural inclination or our natural desires. God has established with his communication and with his involvement with humanity that as far as he is concerned, it's all about giving. God gives and he gives and he gives and he gives. And you know that this must be true because in reality we really have nothing to give. But God has established the pattern. He established the example. He developed the relationship with us because he gave. He maintains the relationship with us because he continues to give. Marriage is the exact parallel to that relationship between God and his church. And so that which God has exampled, or that which God has shown us, is exactly what we are supposed to do when it comes to a marriage, when it comes to committing ourselves to another person in holy matrimony. It's all about what we are here to give, not about what we're here to get. Now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that one should totally forget about him or herself. But what I am saying is, if both parties have entered into this relationship with the right mindset, the mindset that has been given us as an example by God, by Christ, by the Holy Spirit, the giving process, the commitment process of divinity to humanity, then we will not only enter into a relationship that's going to be fruitful, and the reason it's going to be fruitful is because as we give, we receive. And this is so awesome about getting involved or getting a better understanding of sexuality the way God has purposed. The reason that we love God the way we do is not just because he's God, but it's because of what he's done for us. Because of God's awesome giving, because of his unselfishness, because of the sacrifice of his son, Jesus Christ, we fully understand what he's given up. When we fully understand what he's given to us, we in turn reciprocate that giving with giving of ourselves to him. This is what is directly seen